what do? You put your mind into two watertight compartments, one of which you're abreast of science and the modern world and all that kind of thing, and then the other compartment, which simply had nothing to do with that, is a completely cut off thing called religion, where you believe in absolutely ludicrous propositions. Here is then this possibility. See, is it to be no God? Is life just this trip from the maternity ward to the crematorium? And that the issue of religion is to improve that trip. That is to say, through social concern, through getting rid of poverty and war and exploitation and disease. Is that the whole business of religion, or is there something else? Those who take this view, which we will call the secularist position in theology, are of course strongly influenced by contemporary philosophy, especially in that form which is called scientific empiricism or logical positivism, and also, they would say, the notion that there is a God is meaningless because it doesn't help you to make any prediction. Or they can ask it in this way: what evidence, supposing somebody could bring it forward, would completely satisfy you as disproving the existence of God? And no believer in God can think of any evidence that would conclusively prove that there wasn't a God. So they, on logical grounds, take this position. And so, since many theologians are in fact influenced by modern philosophy, take these arguments seriously, they would like to secularize the whole conception of religion, or, to put it in Bonhoeffer's words, have Christianity without religion. Well, now, when you might say there is nothing to life except the trip between the maternity ward and the crematorium, that's what there is. I've heard something like that before. When asked, what is the Buddha? A Chinese master replied, it's windy again this morning. Another Buddhist master, on his deathbed, wrote the poem, from the bathtub to the bathtub I have uttered stuff and nonsense. The bathtub in which the baby is washed at birth, and the bathtub in which the corpse is washed before burial. All the time between, he said, I was going yakety-yak. Now, what about those poems? Do they mean what they say? Well, not quite. There's something different here. Because they are based on a life devoted to the discipline of a very particular kind of meditation, culminating in a completely shattering experience, which is very difficult to talk about. But generally speaking, it is the encounter with eternity, with the eternal. Not necessarily in the sense of that which goes on and on and on through time, but the eternal is the timeless. That which transcends time is beyond measurement in terms of hours and days. And when a person who is in that state of consciousness or has been through it looks at the ordinary everyday world, it's true he sees the ordinary everyday world as we see it, but with a very, very extraordinary difference. And if we would have to put that difference into some sort of Western Christian influenced language, he would perhaps say, don't you realize that sitting around here in this room with our ordinary everyday faces and clothes and personalities, we are sitting smack in the middle of the beatific vision. And that this, sitting here in this room, is infinity and eternity precisely. It is it. And this is the beatific vision. This is God. And it feels that way too. It really does. Or something like it. But in this kind of religion, they still have temples, they have Buddhas, and they chant sutras and offer incense and ring gongs and all that kind of thing. But they're always saying that the highest religion, to get there, you have to kill the Buddha. Supposing a clergyman got up one day in the pulpit and said, every time you say Jesus Christ, you have to wash your mouth out. Because the most dangerous graven images are not those which are made of wood and stone. They are those which are made of ideas. And it is well known to the great mystical tradition of the world, all over the world, that the sort of supreme vision can only come when you have got rid of every idea of God whatsoever. So in that spirit, the great mystics have always ceased to cling to God. That is because the only God you can cling to is the idea of God. In order to discover God, you have entirely to stop clinging. You see, why does one cling to God? For safety, of course. You want to save something. You want to save yourself. I don't care what you mean by saved. Whether it just means feel happy, or feel that life is meaningful, or, there's somebody up there who cares. So one clings. And if you don't cling to God, you cling to something else. The state, money, sex, yourself, power. These are all false gods. But there has to come a state when clinging stops. And only then does the state of faith begin. People who believe in God don't have any faith because they want something to hold on to. So, real faith is when you do not hold on to anything anymore. When the Zen master suddenly discovered that carrying the pail with water in it was a miracle, he discovered that. He realized there isn't anything except God. And boy, if you really know that, you see, you don't need to have a religion. But you can have one because it's a free world. I mean, if you want to try and express this in some way, and all religion is pure gravy after that. See? Any outward manifestation of religion, it's like a man with lots of money making some more. Only it's quite unnecessary. But so, according to the very best theologians, it was never necessary for God to create the world. It didn't add anything to him. He didn't have to do it. He was under no compulsion. So when nothing is being clung to, when one gets to that point, everything blows up. This is what's meant by satori in Zen, sudden awakening. And you suddenly see, good heavens, what was I making all that fuss about? Because here we are. This is what we were looking for all the time. It's right here. And that's the thing. And you realize that you basically, through and through, are all this. Only you got into a kind of a funny illusion. When you get rid of God, all you are doing is you're destroying an idol. And all idols must be destroyed respectfully. Because if Jesus is truly risen from the dead, you don't need the Bible anymore. He's around. Available. You don't need the books.